Yeah, man. Welcome to the Lives podcast.
All right, peace to the world, peace to the world. Hello, this is your host CJ. Welcome to the Life podcast. It's been a minute. It's been a while. I've been busy. Where are we right now? July 7th, 2023. So, this podcast is going to be about the recent conclusion of the California African American Reparations Task Force bill, right? AB 3121 has finally concluded after 2.5 years. Um, I'm sure there's ups, there's downs about it. From a California resident point of view, very excited about it. From a political scientist point of view, I think some things could have been done better. But nonetheless, I commend everybody that was a part of it. Um, Everybody that had partook in it. Um, yeah, we're just gonna talk about a little bit of the process of it, the policy of it, and for any of the future, right? Cities, city councils, other states, right, that are gonna be ushering in this reparation movement or creating your own bill to usher in your own research project or reparations policies. This is going to be something that you want to, tap into and check in. um so I mean, who am I, right? Like why me? Who am I? Good question. So for one, like I said, my name is CJ Alton. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Life Network. What we are is an education platform that is dedicated to promoting Black history, culture, and wellness. And so right now we're developing different curriculums for all students, right? We're very inclusive in that realm of the classroom, wanting to create different curriculums. On top of that, I am a California resident. And if you didn't realize yet, I'm Black. Surprise. So obviously that's not enough, right? Just to be Black and be in California, that's not enough. That's correct. I'm also a political scientist. So I have my bachelor's in political science. I have my master's in urban and public affairs. It's very fancy, just saying public policy. So when it comes to this specific realm of urban and public affairs, when it comes to this realm of reparations policies, for African Americans, that's something that I've been specializing in for some years now. So I felt really comfortable going through the motions, studying this bill. I've been on this assignment studying the reparations movement in California for like a little over a year now, just about a little bit over a year. So, um, and when I say follow, I mean like in depth, like looking at the policy from top to bottom, going out and promoting this bill, right? Educating Black student unions at universities, educating organizations, nonprofit organizations about this bill, even to the extent of presenting this in a town hall. And everybody showed up, white, Black, Mexican, everything, not everything, everybody partook in that event. So that was definitely an accomplishment to be able to take this slide deck that I've been using and educate folks about the movement so they're aware, right? Yeah, so basically, I mean, that's it. Trying to keep this as short as possible. I told myself maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes at the most. So we'll see. But with that said, I would definitely like to go ahead and get into first talking about the policy and the structure of it. And this is for any like city councils, any other state governments putting something together. This is the part where you really want to chime in. So I'm going to do this first. And then when I'm done with this part, you could do whatever you want after. But I definitely felt like some things could have been cleaned up just from a political scientist point of view. All right. So let's get into it. All right. So AB 3121, right? Assembly Bill, California Assembly Bill 3121. You got to commend Secretary of State Shirley N. Weber. She was the predominant author of this bill. You got to commend other members of some organizations. I've talked to just about everything from top to bottom in regards to this hierarchy of this piece of legislation. I'm talking about like the tippy top. I've talked to task force members. I've talked to organization leaders about this stuff. So I'm very well rounded and was very in tuned to what was going on with the process of this entire bill, right? In regards to the policy itself, I would say one of the things that I had a hard time processing was the fact of why a and it's all due respect, right? Let's make sure that I'm not trying to be like discriminatory or racist or anything like that. If you know me, you know I don't get down like that. Um, I had a hard time determining why a governor that is non-black and two other government representatives that are also non-black would be responsible for choosing all nine members of this task force. Um, because the question is like, were they the top nine best representatives for Black Californians? I can't answer that, but it's definitely an argument given that there's almost 3 million Black folks in this country or in this state. Sorry. Especially given that the California governor, Newsom, chose a non-Black member. So one of the members, one of the nine members on this task force was Japanese. Um, I mean, I guess you could say like that's okay, but I didn't feel that that was necessary. Believe it or not, I actually feel member Tamaki is actually more valuable now during the aftermath of 3121 than him actually on the task force itself. I felt like um it could have been another black body there to make history, right? And be a part of that task force and about um bring about different ideas from the black perspective. um on top of that, this bill was signed by the governor September 30th 2020. So what I find so odd is, why did we not as a people be able or have the opportunity to elect at least one task force member? It was election year, and he signed this bill about 5 weeks before the election. So it's like, why weren't there a list of names, right? Anything from like grassroots leaders to, I don't know, business owners to whatever, to list themselves as applicable for that final spot of the task force member, right? It just only makes sense that all members of an African American reparations task force all be African American, right? And anyone that's not African American, they could be an advisor, they could come in and assist and help, but to actually be placed on the task force, an African American task force, that's crazy. Because I don't, unless I'm completely off and I could be miseducated, I don't recall Japanese in 1988 needing our people, needing African Americans to get their reparations. So that is one thing I found very strange. I thought that could have been done better. I thought that the people could have chimed in more and been an actual voice um to represent themselves. So if you allowed the people to at least choose one member, that would give more credence to them trusting the task force and not calling them agents, not bringing about conspiracy theories. Because what we're not going to do is listen to this podcast and pretend like California doesn't have corrupt politicians. If you know anything about Los Angeles in the last year or two, that's already been determined. Like what I'm saying now is not a conspiracy. Like literal LA representatives, right? Politicians have been caught up doing corruption in the last year or two. Like legit. That's not a conspiracy. It's not allegations. They got caught. So um I feel like that would have helped this situation with the task force, just relieve them of being called agents and stuff. Because if the people are choosing them, if the people are voting for them, that leaves less of a I guess you could say a hole in the matter, right? Where um there could be some kind of corruption or just malfeasance going on. So that's something that I would have changed about the policy for sure. Is just allowing the people to choose at least one member, right? I feel like, and I need to read the mental and physical health chapter of the recommendations report to see just how much they drilled into the whole psychological trauma and what we could be compensated for that. There's a lot of different things that they listed out to try and be compensated for, but I feel like California blacks have been psychologically traumatized for a long time. Um, whether that be like hospitals, whether that be the employment sector, whether that be schools, right? We've been subjected, we've been discriminated on. A lot of different things have came about to where, we've experienced psychological trauma. So like for example, if you've gone to K through 12 school, right? If you went through the K through 12 school system in California, that in and of itself has posed trauma in the sense of cultural representation. Like I didn't learn anything during my K through 12 experience in regards to African American history. You learn about slavery, learn about civil rights, and they kind of shut it down there. That's why I prompted the Life Network, because I felt like if the schools weren't going to do it, then let's have a supplemental platform that's willing to do it. Of course, I'm willing to work with any and every school, but until that happens, I do believe we need our own platform where our kids, and our adults, right, us can get this experience. Get the experience of learning about our people, our culture, who we were before slavery, who we were during, and who we are after, and what we can accomplish and what we did accomplish, right? So that's what the Melanin History curriculum is all about, is really describing the accomplishments that we've had, describing the success stories, and just broadening our history to where it's not so marginalized and we feel basically non-represented, right? Where we're not represented, I should say, in the curriculum. So that's what the Life Network is for. But yeah, just in regards to psychological trauma, according to California law, anyone that's experienced psychological trauma, you can make up to like a quarter million in retribution. So if you've experienced psychological trauma in the state for whatever reason, you can get paid out a quarter million. So I feel like there's a case for that. I don't know how far in extent they talked about that. They didn't really talk about it much in terms of monetary value. Um, but that's to be determined. I gotta finish the report up. But just in case, yeah, let's I would say we have to observe that and figure that out as well, right? Just the fact that we're probably it's as a people, we might be the most traumatized people in America. It's possible. It's an argument. But yeah, I feel like that has to be addressed. Um, and then lastly, the aftermath of 3121. So now we're in a space where I knew that this was going to be a problem. This is why I am a political scientist, because I'm able to study certain things and see things before it happens, to where now the bill has concluded July 1st, 2023, right? It's now, as I said, July 7th. What are we doing now? Has the DOJ left a piece of the budget to continue this process? That wasn't expressed. Um, which organizations and companies are going to push through with this? That has not been eloquently expressed. Um, and so I thought about this months ago, like October, like months ago, where I approached a task force member and said, we're going to need some kind of advocacy during and after this bill expires. And here we are. There's nothing. And Black people in and of itself are already not a unified group, especially economically. So now it's like, well, what do we do? And where's the funding come from? How do we continue this process? The idea would have been to continue, for me, to keep promoting this piece of legislation using my slide deck. And well, I'm going to do that on the Lyfe Network's end, but it'd been really nice to get some funding from a department or the task force or somebody, right, to where I can continue this work and continue to travel across California. But that hasn't been expressed. That wasn't in the legislation. So they made a couple motions that they're gonna kind of sort of continue this task force meeting stuff, but I don't really know how effective it's going to be. So that's something that I'm a bit concerned about. But yeah, it's like, what's the aftermath now? Like, what do we do? Right. I think some people are gonna be writing policies and trying to get it passed. But as one of the task force members said himself, it's gonna take a couple of bills and it's gonna take a couple of cycles to actually achieve something. If you think that this California legislature that is majority non-black is just gonna pass anything and everything, they're not. Right. So that $800 billion bill or legislation, right, that the task force economist team prompted up, that's not gonna work. No legislature in the world is going to pass something like that because you're going to put, whether we deserve it or not, right? I'm not saying we don't deserve it as people. I'm just saying from a fundamental economic standpoint, it's not going to happen. It's impossible. So, and you're saying why that is, the California budget, the last adopted California budget is just under 300 billion. 300 billion. That's for 40 million people, right? It's 40 million people in California, approximately. So when you talk about 800 billion for 3 million black people in the state of California, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to go to Biden or Kamala Harris with that. The point is, we did not have any plan afterwards, and the legislation didn't do any justice with that. So hopefully whatever motions the task force made will follow suit, and hopefully it's a success story, right? So that's the policy. Let's begin talking about the actual process and duration of the meetings and procedures and stuff like that. So we all know what 2020 brought about. The governor signed this in September 2020. Very hectic time. No one cared about any legislation other than the CARES Act around that time. That's the legislation that gave us the stimulus checks. So I know you remember that. When it actually got running, right? The task force meetings, they started off online. And I can't remember the first meeting. I don't know if it was December 2020 or if it reached into 2021, but basically, online, the task force had made a motion to describe who was going to be eligible for these reparations. Um, Basically, what they voted on was a 5-4 vote. It was a tight vote. They actually argued it all the way through the conclusion of this bill. But ultimately they voted in favor of needing African American heritage from the 19th century, uh basically describing like slavery, right? Like you have to be a descendant of slaves. I don't really have an argument with that too much. It doesn't really make me any difference per se, because I have a mother born and raised in Los Angeles. I got grandparents from Texas, Louisiana, so I know we're applicable. But then on the other end, right, I have a Caribbean side to me where that side now, right, my father's side, they won't be receiving anything. Even though he's been through his own turmoil with police departments, police brutality, stuff like that. You can argue all those things, but ultimately it was a 5-4 vote. So they decided to go with eligibility and whatnot. So when the meetings actually started in person, I think later in 2021, it was good to see people show up. People have public comments. I don't know how much of their comments were um taken in or accepted or even like reviewed. Um, but there were a lot of people angry. But at the same time, these comments were so special because they brought about reality and the things that really need to happen. So like there was a lot of people saying like we needed land, right? We need resources, we need infrastructure. That's my philosophy of reparations. It's not a cash payment. Um, I think that's very dangerous, especially in the economy. Again, if you don't know economics, you don't really know what's going on. Like the dollar's losing value. So to think that cash payments is like priority is a you're doing your people a disservice by even thinking that. If that's the policy that you're working on, shame on you, honestly, because right now we need to work on how we allocate land, right, to Black folks, how we allocate institutions to Black folks. Because if you have a chapter that says that employment is hindered employment, right, is a huge issue, that's not going to get solved by trying to get into non-Black institutions or trying to get into non-Black businesses. We have to create our own, right, and build our own, right, and allowing us to bring in resources, provide our people with jobs, stuff like that. That's a much more sufficient, inexpensive route than saying, "Oh, hey, $800 billion." Like I don't even know how you get that. I have no idea what they did. But I had to digress on that. I don't believe in that, but I do appreciate the public opinions. Unfortunately, some of them were short. They're like a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I would say the task force, um, just my recommendation for any others that are gonna get ready to start up this, create a meeting where the public gets to speak for even 2, 3 hours and just dedicate that meeting to hearing out, maybe even 4 hours. Dedicate that meeting to hearing out what the public actually has to say, gather up the data, right, in terms of what are some patterns you're hearing, what are some outliers, right, that you're hearing, excuse me, um, and compile that. And that'll give you recommendations because this is the people, right? That's who you're supposed to serve. It's the people. So if the people are saying, hey, land, 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 which is what we heard often, I hope that when I read this report, this recommendation report, I see something about land. Because if you don't see anything about land, then they neglected what the people said. Therefore, we're not going to be satisfied with the process or your recommendations. That's something that's extremely important. So just to get back a little bit about the eligibility requirement, I think this is the segue where we go into the recommendation. So this is the last segment. I told you I didn't want to go too long. But just to get into the eligibility status now, this poses a huge issue. How do a people that are already disenfranchised, discriminated, underfunded, under-resourced, how do we find out our heritage? See, it's funny because the people voting on heritage, most of them already know what their heritage is. So of course they're going to be like, yeah, let's do that, right? And again, I'm not saying that's wrong, but what I do want you to know is you're not going to collect a penny until all of us figure out our heritage. So I don't know how you create this system and create these tools, right? And create this infrastructure for us to call in or walk into, excuse me, for us to call in and walk into to figure out what our heritage is. Now, me personally, me and my family, we have that. But again, you have a lot of people that don't have access to that. We were genocide. there's been genocide, there's been incarceration, there's been all kind of other experiments done to us, all kind of trauma. A lot of Black people don't know their heritage before the 19th century or during the 19th century. So until you do right and help people understand who their heritage is, who's eligible for this, right? And how you're going to make this process actually happen for 2.8 million Black folks, right? Until you figure that out, you're not going to collect your checks. That is the first piece of legislation that should get done. It's figuring out our eligibility. So don't think, oh, well, I have my papers. Like, I don't know about you, but whatever. So now these recommendations have came out. What's next? Well, there's a couple of things I can go on. And this was another thing about the policy I didn't like, was the fact that now we have to wait on the legislature. We have to wait on state committees to write up a policy and submit it and pass it. As I said, state legislatures, it's going to be very tough to convince them to give us anywhere near 800 billion. I'd be shocked if y'all can get 8 billion from them. If you could get 8 billion from them, I will applaud you. So I don't like the process of us having to wait for the legislature to pass whatever policy that we want, because that's going to take forever and a day. A senator on the task force said it himself. It's going to take multiple bills and multiple cycles. What do you think that means? That means it's going to take years. We're not getting anything in 2024, even though we should, and we should hold our vote and collectively vote for the candidate that's going to not just say he's going to do something, but actually draw out an agenda, right? Have an agenda drawn out. I'm going to do this on this date, this on this date, this on this date. And when they have those things drawn out, hold them accountable to those dates. I don't think we're going to do that. I don't think we're collective enough, unfortunately. Which is why I commend a lot of other groups. Like I commend some of the Hispanic groups, the Latin groups. They're very collective, right? They practice communalism quite well. Asians, business wise, they do that quite well. White folks even do it quite well in regards to business. So we need to get on that level as Black people, and until we do, I don't know how this is going to work legislatively. There's the option to write out some propositions, right? I think 2024 will pose some propositions that we can vote for. But then that's going to require the California public to be on our side. We're only 6% of the state. So 94% approximately of the state of California is non-Black. So we're going to be dependent on them to pass a proposition if we were to go that route. How do we convince them and influence them? We do the same thing that I was doing. That's why I was trying to go out here and advocate and continue to go to different universities, go to different town halls and all these different events to continue to educate. I would recommend anybody that has the power to do it, and continue this process. Otherwise, we're not going to get through the legislature. We're not going to get through propositions. That means it leaves it to the executive, right? It leaves it to the governor to write out something. And the House or Senate, state Senate, can easily just write that off and say, no, we're not doing that. They have the power to veto those kind of things, right? And then, of course, you have California Supreme Court as well, or Superior Court. Supreme Court? I think it's Superior Court. California Superior Court. But anyways, they have the power to scratch that off and say it's unconstitutional, right? Yeah, so really, that's all I have to say. I could go on and on and on and on, but for now, I think that's it. There are some concerns, but at the same time, there were some success stories. So now the next bit is just to read this final report and try to do what you can at the local level, right? Just do what you can at the local level, help out however you can. So with that said, I'm gonna leave y'all to it, and you'll be hearing from me hopefully sooner than later with some good news. All right. So with that, peace to you.